What if I told you that the strongest person in the room is not the one who fights every battle, but the one who chooses which battles deserve their energy? Think about the last time someone said something that made your blood boil, your heart raced, your muscles tensed, your mind created 100 different responses, each one sharper than the last. You felt powerful in that moment of reaction, didn't you? You felt alive, you felt justified. But were you truly powerful, or were you simply a puppet dancing to someone else's words? Most people confuse reaction with strength. They believe that showing their emotions, expressing their anger, defending their position makes them formidable. They wear their sensitivity like armor, ready to strike at the first sign of offense. They think this makes them warriors. They are wrong. The ancient warriors understood something that modern minds have forgotten. True invincibility comes not from building thicker walls, but from becoming like water. Water doesn't fight the rock. Water doesn't argue with the mountain. Water simply flows around every obstacle, and in time water shapes the very landscape itself. You have been taught to be the rock, solid, unmovable, reactive. But rocks, no matter how massive, eventually crumble under pressure. Water endures, water transforms, water wins without ever declaring war. This is the first paradox. To become unshakable, you must learn to bend. To become invincible, you must surrender the need to fight every battle, to act as if nothing bothers you. You must first understand what it truly means to be bothered. When something bothers you, what is actually happening? Your mind creates a story. Your body responds to that story as if it were reality. Your emotions follow the body's lead, and suddenly you are no longer yourself. You have become a character in someone else's drama, reading lines you never chose to speak. But what if you could step off that stage? What if you could watch the drama unfold without becoming part of it? What if you could remain yourself, regardless of what chaos swirls around you? The mountain does not get angry at the storm. The mountain does not fight the wind. The mountain simply stands, witnessing the storm's fury, knowing that storms pass but mountains remain. The mountain is not bothered, because the mountain understands its nature. The mountain knows what it is. Do you know what you are? You are not your thoughts. Thoughts come and go like clouds across the sky. You are the sky itself. You are not your emotions. Emotions rise and fall like waves on the ocean. You are the ocean itself. You are not your reactions. Reactions happen to you. You are the one who can choose whether to participate in them or simply observe them. This is not philosophy. This is practical power. When you understand that you are the observer of your experience, rather than the victim of your experience, everything changes. The harsh words of others become like raindrops on a lake. They create ripples, yes, but they do not change the nature of the lake. The lake remains water. You remain you, but this requires training. Not the kind of training where you lift heavy weights or run long distances. This requires training your mind to distinguish between what is happening and what you think is happening, between what someone said and what you believe they meant, between the action and your interpretation of that action. Most people live their entire lives reacting to their interpretations rather than responding to reality. They fight shadows. They argue with ghosts. They exhaust themselves battling enemies that exist only in their minds. You can choose differently. When someone speaks to you with anger, you can choose to see their pain rather than feel attacked. When someone criticizes you, you can choose to extract any useful information and discard the emotional packaging. When someone tries to make you angry, you can choose to remain curious about why they need you to share their emotional state. This is not about becoming cold or disconnected. This is about becoming conscious. This is about recognizing that your emotional state is your responsibility, not the responsibility of everyone around you. This is about understanding that your peace of mind is not dependent on other people's behavior. The warrior in ancient times knew that the strongest position is the one where you cannot be moved from your center. Not because you are rigid, but because you are rooted. Not because you are stubborn, but because you are stable. Not because you don't feel, but because you choose what you do with what you feel. Your center is not a place you go to. Your center is what you are. But most people have forgotten this. They have placed their center outside themselves, in other people's opinions, in external circumstances, in things they cannot control. And then they wonder why they feel so unstable, so reactive, so easily disturbed. When your center is within you, nothing outside you can move you from it. When your peace comes from your understanding, rather than your circumstances, your peace becomes unshakable. When your strength comes from your awareness, rather than your reactions, your strength becomes inexhaustible. Think of the tree that survives the hurricane. It is not the tree that refuses to bend. The rigid tree breaks. It is the tree with deep roots and flexible branches. The tree that can dance with the wind without losing its foundation. The tree that can yield without surrendering its essential nature. You can become that tree. But first you must recognize how you have been living. Most people's emotional state is like a leaf in the wind, blown this way and that by every external force. Someone frowns, and they feel rejected. Someone criticizes, and they feel defensive. Someone ignores them, and they feel insignificant. They have made their inner world dependent on the outer world, and the outer world is chaos. This is exhausting. This is why so many people feel drained by social interactions. This is why so many people need to recover from their own lives. They are spending their energy reacting to every stimulus, fighting every perceived threat, defending against every imagined attack. But what if you could move through the world like a skilled martial artist, not looking for fights, not avoiding conflicts, but simply present and aware, ready to respond appropriately to whatever arises. Not reactive but responsive, not defensive but discerning, not bothered, because nothing has the power to knock you off your center. This begins with your breath. Right now, as you listen to these words, notice your breathing. Is it shallow or deep, fast or slow, tense or relaxed? Your breath is the bridge between your unconscious reactions and your conscious responses. When you control your breath, you influence your state. When you influence your state, you choose your response. Most people breathe like they live hurried, shallow, reactive. They breathe in response to their emotions instead of using their breath to guide their emotions. They let their circumstances determine their state instead of using their state to navigate their circumstances. The warrior breathes differently, deep, slow, intentional. The warrior's breath is like an anchor in rough seas, keeping them steady while chaos storms around them. The warrior's breath is like a sword, cutting through confusion to find clarity. The warrior's breath is like a shield protecting their inner peace from external turbulence. You can learn to breathe like a warrior. You can learn to use your breath as a tool for maintaining your center. When someone speaks harshly to you, breathe deeply before you respond. When you feel anger rising, breathe slowly and let the anger move through you without taking root. When you feel the urge to react, breathe consciously and create space between the trigger and your response. In that space, you have power. In that space, you have choice. In that space, you remember who you are beneath all the noise. The ancient wisdom teaches that the mind is like a lake. When the lake is disturbed, the surface becomes choppy and you cannot see clearly to the bottom. But when the mind is still, when the surface is calm, you can see all the way through to the depths. You can see reality clearly. You can respond from wisdom rather than react from confusion. But stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is not numbness. Stillness is not the absence of feeling. Stillness is the presence of awareness. It is feeling everything but being attached to nothing. It is experiencing fully but identifying with none of it. It is being completely present without being completely consumed. When you master this kind of stillness, you become like the eye of a hurricane. All around you there may be chaos, noise, drama, conflict, but at your center there is perfect calm, perfect clarity, perfect peace. And from this place of stillness, you can see clearly what requires your attention and what does not, what deserves your energy and what is simply noise. What is actually happening and what is just story. Most people cannot tell the difference between what happens and what they think about what happens. They cannot separate the event from their interpretation. They cannot distinguish between the person and their own projection onto that person. They live in a world of their own mental creation, reacting to phantoms, fighting illusions, defending against threats that exist only in their imagination. But when you learn to be still, when you learn to observe, when you learn to breathe consciously and respond rather than react, you begin to see reality as it is rather than as you fear it might be. You begin to respond to what is actually in front of you rather than what you imagine is behind it. You begin to interact with people as they are rather than as your past experiences have taught you to expect them to be. This changes everything. When you are not bothered, you are not reactive. When you are not reactive, you are not predictable. When you are not predictable, you cannot be manipulated. When you cannot be manipulated, you become truly free. And when you are truly free, you become truly powerful. But this power is not the power to control others. This power is not the power to make others do what you want. This power is not the power to impose your will on the world. This power is the power to remain yourself no matter what happens around you. This power is the power to choose your response to any situation. This power is the power to maintain your peace, regardless of external circumstances. And this power, once developed, becomes unshakable, because it does not depend on anything outside of you. It does not require other people to behave in certain ways. It does not need circumstances to align perfectly. It does not demand that the world conform to your preferences. It simply requires that you remember who you are and act from that place of remembering. The person who cannot be bothered is not someone who doesn't care. The person who cannot be bothered is someone who cares so deeply about their own state of being that they refuse to let external chaos disturb their inner peace. They care so much about their ability to respond wisely that they will not waste their energy on automatic reactions. They care so much about their power to choose that they will not surrender that power to anyone else's emotions or agendas. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to control everything around you, you gain control over the one thing that actually matters. When you stop fighting every battle, you become truly formidable. When you stop being bothered by everything, you become disturbed by nothing. And in this state of undisturbable peace, you find something remarkable. You find that you can be more present with others because you are not defending yourself against them. You can be more loving because you are not protecting yourself from love. You can be more authentic because you are not pretending to be someone you think others want you to be. You can simply be yourself. And yourself, when not distorted by reaction, when not colored by defensiveness, when not shaped by the need to please or impress or protect, is magnificent. Yourself in its natural state is wise and strong and peaceful and free. This is what you are training for. Not to become someone else, not to adopt a new personality, not to suppress your humanity. You are training to return to your natural state. You are training to remember what you actually are, beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the programming, beneath all the learned patterns of reaction and defense. You are training to become invincible through the ultimate surrender. The surrender of the false self that thinks it needs to fight the world to survive. The surrender of the ego that believes its worth depends on other people's validation. The surrender of the mind that thinks it must control everything to be safe. And in this surrender, you find your true strength. The strength that cannot be shaken because it is not built on anything shakeable. The strength that cannot be broken because it is not made of breakable material. The strength that cannot be disturbed because it has found its source in the undisturbable depths of your own being. This is where true power lives. Not in your ability to make others fear you, but in your inability to be moved by fear. Not in your capacity to dominate others, but in your mastery of yourself. Not in your skill at winning arguments, but in your wisdom to know which conversations are worth having and which ones are simply noise. When you reach this place, you will understand something that cannot be taught, only experienced. You will understand that acting as if nothing bothers you is not an act at all. It is simply the natural state of someone who has remembered who they truly are. It is simply what happens when you stop identifying with your reactions and start identifying with your deeper nature. It is simply the way you move through the world when you have found your center and learn to live from that place of unshakable stability. And from this place everything becomes possible. Because when you are not wasting your energy on reactions, you have tremendous energy available for conscious action. When you are not fighting reality, you can work skillfully with whatever reality presents. When you are not bothered by others, you can actually help them. When you are not disturbed by circumstances, you can respond to them with wisdom and effectiveness. This is the beginning. This recognition that true strength comes not from fighting, but from the deep understanding of when to fight and when to flow. This awareness that your power lies not in controlling others, but in the absolute mastery of your own responses. This knowing that to act as if nothing bothers you, you must first understand the very nature of what it means to be bothered. And once you understand this, once you truly grasp this paradox of invincibility through surrender, you are ready to learn the practices that will make this understanding a living reality in your daily experience. You are ready to build the unshakable foundation upon which this kind of presence can stand. There are 3 pillars that support this unshakable presence. 3 foundations that once established create a stability so profound that no external force can disturb your inner equilibrium. These are not theories to contemplate. These are practices to embody. These are ways of being that transform understanding into experience. The first pillar is stillness, not the stillness of the grave, but the stillness of the master archer just before the arrow is released. Not the stillness of sleep, but the stillness of complete alertness. Not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness that contains infinite potential for wise action. Most people fear stillness because they have never experienced true stillness. They have only experienced the forced quiet that comes from suppression, the artificial calm that comes from numbing, the fake peace that comes from avoidance. True stillness is alive. True stillness is aware. True stillness is the most dynamic state possible, because from stillness any response is available. When you master stillness, you master time itself.
In stillness, you are not rushing toward the future or fleeing from the past. You are completely present. And in complete presence, you have access to all your wisdom, all your strength, all your clarity. In complete presence, you can see situations as they actually are, rather than as your conditioning tells you they should be. But how do you cultivate this stillness in a world that never stops moving? How do you find this quiet center when everything around you is noise?
You begin with your breath. Right now, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you can access this stillness through conscious breathing, not special breathing, not complicated breathing, simply conscious breathing. Breathe in with full awareness, breathe out with complete attention. Do this 3 times. And notice how your entire system begins to settle. This is not magic. This is physiology. When you breathe consciously, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate slows. Your muscles relax. Your mind clears. In just 3 conscious breaths, you can shift from reactive mode to responsive mode, from chaos to calm, from disturbed to undisturbed. But stillness is more than a breathing technique. Stillness is a way of being. It is the ability to remain centered while the world spins around you. It is the capacity to maintain your inner quiet while outer noise demands your attention. It is the skill of staying present when everything pulls you toward past regrets or future anxieties. The warrior cultivates stillness not for its own sake, but because from stillness comes perfect action. When your mind is stilled, you can hear the subtle signals that guide right action. When your emotions are stilled, you can respond from wisdom rather than react from wound. When your body is stilled, you can move with precision and grace rather than flail with desperation and force. Think of the master swordsman. Before each movement there is perfect stillness, not hesitation, not uncertainty. Perfect stillness that contains complete readiness. From this stillness the sword moves exactly where it needs to go, exactly when it needs to move, with exactly the force required. No wasted motion, no unnecessary effort, no second guessing. You can learn to move through life like this master swordsman. Each word you speak can come from stillness. Each action you take can arise from this centered place. Each response you give can emerge from this foundation of inner quiet. And when your words, actions, and responses come from stillness, they carry a power that cannot be manufactured through force or effort. People will feel this stillness in your presence. They will sense that you are not reactive, not desperate, not grasping. They will recognize, perhaps unconsciously, that you cannot be pushed off your center. And this recognition will change how they interact with you. They will speak more carefully. They will act more respectfully. They will approach you with greater consideration, because they sense that you are not a person who can be easily disturbed or manipulated. This brings us to the second pillar, observation. The ability to witness your own experience without becoming lost in it. The capacity to watch your thoughts without believing all of them. The skill of feeling your emotions without being controlled by them. Most people are not observers of their experience. They are victims of their experience. They are swept away by every thought, dragged around by every emotion, tossed about by every circumstance. They have no perspective on their own mental and emotional processes, because they are completely identified with those processes. But you can learn to step back. You can develop the ability to watch your own mind the way you might watch clouds moving across the sky. Interesting, ever-changing, sometimes beautiful, sometimes stormy, but not you. You are the sky. The clouds are just passing through. When someone criticizes you, Instead of immediately defending or attacking, you can observe your impulse to defend or attack. You can watch the heat rise in your chest. You can notice the thoughts that begin to form. You can feel the urge to respond immediately. And in that observation you create space. In that space you have choice. The observer in you is never disturbed because the observer is not participating in the drama. The observer is simply watching. And from this place of watching, you can choose whether to engage or not. You can decide whether this situation deserves your energy or not. You can determine whether your participation will be helpful or harmful. This is not detachment. This is not coldness. This is conscious engagement. When you are observing rather than reacting, you can actually be more present with others, not less. You can listen more clearly, because you are not preparing your defense. You can understand more accurately, because you are not filtering everything through your own emotional charge. You can respond more helpfully, because you are not responding from your own wounds. The observer sees patterns that the participant cannot see. The observer notices recurring themes in your life that reveal important lessons. The observer recognizes when you are repeating old patterns that no longer serve you. The observer can guide you toward responses that align with your deeper values rather than your immediate impulses. But observation requires practice. Your mind has been trained to react immediately to every stimulus. Your emotions have been conditioned to respond automatically to familiar triggers. Your body has learned to tense up the moment conflict appears. These are deeply ingrained patterns that will not change simply because you understand them intellectually. You must train your observer the way an athlete trains their body, consistently, patiently, with gentle persistence. Every time you notice yourself getting caught up in mental drama, you can step back into observation. Every time you feel yourself becoming reactive, you can return to witnessing. Every time you start to take things personally, you can remember that you are the observer, not the observed. And as your observer grows stronger, something remarkable happens. You begin to see that most of what disturbs people is not actually what is happening, but their interpretation of what is happening. You begin to recognize that most conflicts are not about the surface issue, but about deeper needs and fears that are not being addressed. You begin to understand that most people's behavior toward you has very little to do with you, and very much to do with their own internal state. This understanding naturally leads to the third pillar, conscious response. The ability to choose your response based on wisdom rather than wound, on clarity rather than confusion, on purpose rather than pattern. Most people respond automatically. Someone raises their, someone shows anger, they become defensive. Someone acts aggressively, they either fight back or shut down. These automatic responses are not responses at all, they are simply reactions, and reactions by definition are not conscious choices. But when you have developed stillness and observation, conscious response becomes possible. You can feel the automatic pattern beginning to activate, but you do not have to follow it. You can observe the familiar reaction arising, but you do not have to express it. You can notice the habitual response forming, but you can choose a different path. Conscious response is not about finding the perfect thing to say or do. Conscious response is about choosing your response from your highest understanding rather than your lowest programming. It is about acting from your values rather than your triggers. It is about responding to what the situation actually needs rather than what your emotions demand. Sometimes conscious response means speaking clearly and directly. Sometimes it means remaining silent and letting the moment pass.
Sometimes it means asking a question to better understand what is really happening. Sometimes it means walking away because the situation does not deserve your energy. Sometimes it means staying present because your calm presence is exactly what is needed. The person who has mastered conscious response cannot be controlled by others because their responses do not come from predictable patterns. You cannot make them angry because they choose whether or not to express anger. You cannot make them defensive because they do not identify with the things you might attack. You cannot manipulate them because they are responding from awareness, not from automatic programming. But conscious response requires that you know yourself very well. You must understand your own triggers, your own patterns, your own wounds. You must be aware of your own values, your own priorities, your own deeper purposes. You must recognize the difference between responses that serve your highest good and reactions that simply perpetuate old cycles of conflict and confusion. This self-knowledge comes through honest self-observation, not self-judgment, not self-criticism, not self-attack. Simply honest looking at how you actually behave, how you actually respond, how you actually show up in the world. And this looking must be done with the same gentle curiosity you might bring to watching a child learn to walk. Mistakes are not failures, they are information. Reactions are not problems, they are opportunities to choose differently next time. When you combine these three pillars, conscious observation and conscious response, conscious, you become someone who truly cannot be bothered. Not because you do not care, but because you care so much about your own state of being that you refuse to let external chaos disturb your inner peace. Not because you are insensitive, but because you are so sensitive that you can feel the difference between what deserves your energy and what does not.
But these pillars must be practiced. They must be exercised like muscles. They must be cultivated like a garden. You cannot simply understand them intellectually and expect them to support you in moments of challenge. You must make them part of your daily experience, part of your moment-to-moment awareness, part of your way of being in the world. The ancient masters understood that transformation happens through practice, not through thinking about practice. They knew that wisdom becomes real only when it is embodied, only when it is lived, only when it is tested in the fire of actual experience. So begin now. In this moment, as you listen to these words, cultivate stillness. Let your breath slow down, let your muscles relax, let your mind settle into the present moment. Feel the calm that is always available to you when you are not fighting reality. And as you cultivate stillness, practice observation, notice what is happening in your mind right now. What thoughts are arising, what emotions are present, what sensations are you feeling in your body? Simply notice without judging, without trying to change anything, without getting lost in the content of what you observe. And from this place of still observation, practice conscious response. The next time someone speaks to you, for just a moment before you respond. The next time you feel a strong emotion, breathe deeply before you act on it. The next time you face a challenging situation, ask yourself what response would serve the highest good of everyone involved. These are not complicated practices. These are simple shifts in awareness that can be made in any moment, in any situation, with any person. But simple does not mean easy. These practices require commitment, patience, and gentle persistence. They require that you value your inner peace more than you value being right. They require that you care more about your own growth than you care about controlling others. But the rewards are immeasurable. When you build your life on these three pillars, you become unshakable. Not rigid, but flexible. Not hard, but resilient. Not closed but boundaried, not cold but discerning, not distant but present. You become someone who can remain calm in chaos, clear in confusion, and centered in conflict. You become someone whose presence alone can help others find their own center. You become someone who demonstrates through their very being that it is possible to live with grace, wisdom, and strength regardless of external circumstances. And this demonstration is perhaps the greatest gift you can offer the world. In a time when so many people feel reactive, desperate, and overwhelmed, your unshakable presence becomes a reminder of what is possible. Your stillness becomes an invitation for others to find their own stillness. Your conscious responses become a model for what mature, wise interaction looks like. This is how change happens. Not through forcing others to be different, but through becoming so grounded in your own center that your very presence shifts the energy of every room you enter. Not through arguing for peace, but through embodying peace so completely that conflict naturally de-escalates in your presence. Not through teaching others how to be calm, but through being so centered yourself that your calmness becomes contagious. The three pillars of stillness, observation, and conscious response are not just personal development tools. They are instruments of transformation that extend far beyond your individual experience. They are ways of being that contribute to the healing and awakening of everyone you encounter. But this contribution happens naturally, effortlessly, as a byproduct of your own inner work. You do not practice these pillars in order to change others. You practice them because they return you to your natural state of wisdom, strength, and peace. You practice them because they align you with your deepest values and highest aspirations. You practice them because they make your life more beautiful, more meaningful, more genuinely satisfying. And as your life becomes an expression of these qualities, as your daily experience becomes grounded in these foundations, you will find that acting as if nothing bothers you is no longer an act. It becomes as natural as breathing, as spontaneous as laughter, as effortless as the sunrise. This is the promise of conscious living. This is the reward of inner work. This is what becomes possible when you stop trying to fix the world and start embodying the change you wish to see. When you build your life on unshakable foundations, you become unshakable. And from this unshakable place, you can offer the world exactly what it most needs. A living example of what it means to be truly free. Now comes the most important question: how do you live this way every single day? How do you maintain this unshakable presence when life tests you repeatedly? How do you remain the unmoved mountain when storms of circumstance rage around you with relentless fury? The answer lies not in perfection, but in return. Not in never falling, but in knowing how to find your center again and again. Not in avoiding all disturbance, but in shortening the time between disturbance and recovery. The mountain does not remain unmoved because it never faces storms. The mountain remains unmoved because its foundation reaches so far down into the earth that surface weather cannot shake its core. Your foundation is not built once and forgotten. Your foundation is maintained through daily practice, moment by moment awareness, breath by breath choice. Every morning before the world makes its demands on your attention, you have an opportunity to establish your center. Not through complicated rituals or lengthy procedures, but through simple conscious connection with your breath, your body, your deeper intention for the day. 5 minutes of conscious breathing can set the tone for 12 hours of conscious living. But what happens when you forget? What happens when someone's words hit you in exactly the right way to trigger your old patterns? What happens when circumstances align to test every principle you have learned? This is where the real training begins.
This is where theory meets the fire of actual experience. This is where you learn the difference between understanding these principles and embodying them under pressure. The untrained person, when triggered, becomes completely identified with their reaction. They are their anger, they are their hurt, they are their defensive response. There is no space between stimulus and reaction, no between trigger and explosion, no choice between automatic pattern and conscious response. But you have trained differently. You have developed the observer. You have cultivated stillness. You have practiced conscious response. So when the trigger comes, something different happens. You feel the familiar heat rising, but you also notice yourself feeling it. You sense the old pattern activating, but you also witness it activating. You experience the pull toward automatic reaction, but you also remember that you have other choices. This is the moment of power. This is where all your practice pays dividends. This is where you get to choose, in real time, who you want to be in this situation. Do you want to be the person who reacts automatically, or the person who responds consciously? Do you want to give your power away to someone else's emotional state, or do you want to maintain your own center? Sometimes you will choose well, sometimes you will remember your training and respond from your highest understanding. Sometimes you will remain the unmoved mountain while chaos swirls around you. And in those moments, you will taste the freedom that comes from acting as if nothing bothers you, because in that moment nothing does bother you. But sometimes you will forget. Sometimes the trigger will be so sudden, so unexpected, so perfectly aimed at your most vulnerable spot, that you will react before you remember you have choices. Sometimes you will become the very person you have been training not to be. Sometimes you will be bothered, and everyone will know it. This is not failure. This is information. This is feedback about where your practice needs to go next. This is the curriculum life is offering you for your continued growth. The mountain does not judge itself for feeling the earthquake. The mountain simply returns to its natural stability as quickly as possible. Your ability to return to center after being knocked off center is more important than never being knocked off center in the first place. Your skill at finding your stillness again after losing it is more valuable than maintaining perfect stillness at all times. Your capacity to forgive yourself for being human while continuing to aspire to your highest potential is what makes long-term transformation possible.
The master is not someone who never makes mistakes. The master is someone who learns from every mistake, who uses every failure as fuel for deeper understanding, who treats every setback as information about what needs attention next. The master maintains their center not through perfection but through practice, not through never falling but through standing up quickly each time they fall. And as you practice this way of living, something profound begins to happen. The triggers that once sent you into hours of emotional turmoil begin to affect you for minutes instead. The comments that once ruined your entire day begin to pass through your awareness like clouds across the sky. The situations that once seemed overwhelming begin to feel manageable, even routine. You begin to notice that your presence has an effect on others. People become calmer around you. Conflicts de-escalate more quickly when you are present. Conversations become more productive when you participate from your center rather than from your wounds. Your unshakable presence becomes a gift to everyone you encounter. But this is not something you do for others. This is something that happens naturally when you are grounded in your own truth, centered in your own being, connected to your own source of strength and wisdom. When you are not seeking anything from others, not trying to prove anything to others, not defending yourself against others, you can simply be present with others. And your presence, free from agenda or attachment, becomes a space where others can find their own center. This is how you change the world. Not through arguments or demands or manipulation, not through trying to make others see things your way or behave according to your preferences, but through becoming so grounded in peace that your very presence invites peace. Through becoming so rooted in wisdom that your responses demonstrate what wisdom looks like in action. Through becoming so centered in love that others feel safe to lower their defenses and remember their own capacity for love. The unmoved mountain does not try to move other mountains. The unmoved mountain simply stands in its truth, demonstrates its strength, offers its stability to anyone who needs solid ground beneath their feet. The unmoved mountain changes the landscape not through force but through presence, not through action but through being. And you can become this kind of presence in your family, in your workplace, in your community. You can become the person others turn to when they need someone who will not be shaken by their crisis, who will not be drawn into their drama, who will not lose their center even when everyone else is losing theirs. But this requires daily commitment. This requires moment-to-moment choice. This requires that you value your inner peace more than you value being right. More than you value getting your way, more than you value other people's approval or agreement. Most people will not understand this choice. Most people will interpret your calm as indifference, your non-reactivity as coldness, your refusal to engage in drama as rejection. They will try to pull you into their emotional storms. They will test your boundaries. They will challenge your commitment to remaining centered. This is where your practice deepens. This is where you learn to maintain your love while maintaining your boundaries. This is where you develop the ability to be compassionate without being consumed, caring without being codependent, helpful without being manipulated. You learn to say no with kindness but firmness. You learn to set limits with clarity but not cruelty. You learn to protect your energy without building walls around your heart. You learn to remain open while remaining grounded, available while remaining centered, loving while remaining whole. And as you master this balance, you begin to understand something that cannot be taught, only experienced. You begin to see that the person who cannot be bothered is not someone who has learned to suppress their feelings or ignore their needs or pretend they do not care. The person who cannot be bothered is someone who has learned to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to care profoundly without being consumed, to love fully without losing themselves. This is emotional maturity. This is spiritual mastery. This is what it means to be truly powerful. Not power over others, but power over your own responses. Not power to control external circumstances, but power to choose your internal state regardless of external circumstances. Not power to make others do what you want, but power to remain who you want to be no matter what others do. When you reach this level of mastery, you understand why the ancient teachings speak of the warrior who wins without fighting, the leader who governs without controlling, the teacher who instructs without speaking. You understand that the most profound influence comes not from what you do but from who you are, not from your actions but from your presence, not from your words but from your being. And you understand finally that acting as if nothing bothers you is not an act at all. It is simply what happens when you have found your true center and learn to live from that place of unshakable stability. It is simply the natural expression of someone who has remembered their essential nature and refuses to be distracted from it by the passing storms of circumstance. The child who throws a tantrum when they do not get their way is not bad or wrong. The child simply has not yet learned that their happiness does not depend on getting their way.
The adult who becomes reactive when others do not meet their expectations is not bad or wrong. The adult simply has not yet learned that their peace does not depend on others meeting their expectations. But you can learn this. You can develop the understanding that your emotional state is your responsibility, not the responsibility of everyone around you. You can cultivate the wisdom that
your sense of worth comes from within, not from external validation. You can master the art of maintaining your center regardless of whether others approve of your choices or agree with your perspectives. And when you have learned this, when you have truly integrated this understanding into your daily experience, you become free. Free from the need to control others. Free from the compulsion to defend yourself against every perceived slight. Free from the exhaustion that comes from making your happiness dependent on circumstances beyond your control. You become someone who can enjoy good fortune without attachment and face adversity without despair. Someone who can receive praise without ego inflation and criticism without ego deflation. Someone who can be present with others' joy without envy and present with others' pain without being overwhelmed. You become the unmoved mountain, not cold or distant or uncaring but grounded and stable and available. Not rigid or stubborn or inflexible but rooted and centered and strong. Not isolated or separate or superior but connected to something deeper than the surface waves of daily drama. And from this place of unshakable presence you offer the world something it desperately needs. A living demonstration that it is possible to remain human while transcending the petty reactive patterns that keep most people trapped in cycles of conflict and confusion. You become proof that peace is possible, that wisdom is achievable, that love can be both strong and soft, both powerful and gentle. This is your invitation, not to become perfect but to become real. Not to never be disturbed, but to learn how to return to your center more and more quickly each time you are disturbed. Not to avoid all challenges, but to meet every challenge from a place of inner strength and clarity. The path is simple, though not always easy. The practices are straightforward, though they require consistency. The principles are clear, though they must be tested in the fire of actual experience. Breathe consciously, observe without judgment. Respond from wisdom rather than wound. Return to your center whenever you notice you have left it. Choose peace over the need to be right. Choose love over the urge to defend. Choose presence over the pull of past and future. Do this today. Do this in the next conversation you have. Do this the next time someone tries to disturb your peace. Do this until it becomes as natural as breathing, as automatic as your heartbeat, as effortless as the sun rising each morning. And remember, always remember that you are not trying to become someone different. You are simply returning to who you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and reactivity and learned patterns of defense. You are uncovering your natural state of wisdom, strength, and peace. You are remembering what it feels like to be truly free. The mountain was never moved by the storm, because the mountain knew what it was. And you, when you remember what you are, will find that nothing can move you from your center. Nothing can disturb your peace. Nothing can diminish your light. You are the unmoved mountain. You always have been. You always will be. Now it is time to live as if you know this truth. Now it is time to act as if nothing bothers you, because in your deepest essence nothing can